goes on between the locker room with the team is, between the team and, we're a family. And, sometimes family business just doesn't need to be put out there.
That was Rockets forward Jae'Sean Tate over the weekend when things seemed to come to a head for the Rockets after they dropped their 7th in a row. We will get into all that, all kinds of drama on and off the court for the Houston Rockets. We'll also touch a little bit on the Texans, who, if you're a Texans fan, I think you can mercifully say the season is coming to an end this week when they close things out against the Tennessee Titans. We'll get into all that and more tonight on the Fox 26 Sports Stream. As always, we thank you for joining us. I'm sports producer Sal Manine here at Fox 26. You can find us every Monday night just after 7 o'clock on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, search Fox 26 Houston. You can go to our Facebook page and, of course, on our website, fox26houston.com. So I mentioned things kind of came to a head over the weekend. Saturday night, it was an awkward game for Houston, as obviously COVID has been wreaking all kinds of havoc across the sports landscape, but especially in basketball, where the Rockets had guys going in and out of protocols. They weren't sure when or if they would play their games. They had a back-to-back Friday and Saturday night against the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets, 2 contenders for the playoffs, and to possibly go even deeper into that, you're facing off on Saturday against the reigning MVP Nikola Jokic and company, and all of a sudden Christian Wood is not starting. He's on the bench, but he's been the Rockets' best player the past 2 seasons in the aftermath of the James Harden trade and restructuring everything and this rebuild. Your best player's there. He's in uniform. He's not playing. No one knew exactly what was going on until he checked in late in the first half, then did not play the entire second half. Then Kevin Porter Jr., your starting point guard, just coming back from injury, had played some good minutes in his limited time since returning to the lineup. All of a sudden, he seems to be getting into it with guys on the bench in the first half, and then he's nowhere to be seen for the second half. And then it's after the game when all of a sudden these cryptic things are coming out from the team on their post-game interviews, and then the reports from ESPN and The Athletic that supposedly Kevin Porter Jr. got into it with assistant coach John Lucas, and things got so heated that KPJ decided he'd had enough and he walked off, left Toyota Center in the middle of the game. And then Christian Wood had a disagreement with the coaches about his playing time. He had supposedly violated a team rule. That was what Stephen Silas said. ESPN was reporting that Christian Wood missed a mandatory COVID test, and that held up the team's shoot around in practice. And so that's why Stephen Silas elected not to start him. And then when the coaches said, all right, you're going in, he didn't want to go in the second half. And so that's what happened over the weekend. And then tonight, the Rockets are in Philly. Both Christian Wood and Kevin Porter Jr. have been suspended for tonight's game. So let's get into all of it and who said what and what we do know for certain from the team. Let's start with Saturday night. Here is what Stephen Silas had to say on just what went down at the half that seemed to really be how everything started to percolate after the Nuggets put up a 47-point second quarter Saturday night en route to a big win for them and the Rockets' 7th loss in a row.
He broke a team rule. I didn't start him. And then we just decided not to play him in the second half.
If he was playing in the first half, I guess that was not starting was the break because of breaking the team rule.
Right.
What was the decision to not play in the second half?
Coach's decision.
So that's what Coach Silas had to say about Christian Wood. And at that time, he said it was a coach's decision. Then an ESPN report came out that said, The Athletic, Shams Charania reported that Christian Wood would not check in when the coaches asked him in the second half. And here's what was going on in the locker room at halftime on Saturday night at Toyota Center, which if you were watching the game or if you happened to be there, the Rockets barely made it out in time to actually start the second half. Typically, teams come out with several minutes still left on the halftime clock. Guys can get up a few shots, warm up again, stretch out, but the Rockets didn't make it back to the bench and almost didn't get out there before the clock hit triple zeros. And by NBA rules, they have to start the second half. And this is why all of that happened.
Angry at halftime that we had just given up 47 points. So we watched the film. We had a spirited debate at halftime. And, you know, I have certain demands of this group as far as playing hard. Making mistakes is different than giving the effort. And I wasn't satisfied with the effort. So halftime took a little bit longer, and then getting organized after halftime took a little bit longer as well.
So obviously, Coach Silas being rather diplomatic in the moment, not getting into the specifics of Kevin Porter Jr. Some reports saying had to be held back from John Lucas, who was challenging KPJ, who, remember, is the starting point guard for the Rockets at this point. And one of the many reasons that John Lucas is not just a part of this staff, but has been revered in NBA circles throughout his entire career is his ability to help mold young players both on and off the court. And things finally came to a head in which obviously Kevin Porter Jr. was unhappy with whatever criticism was being levied against him. This is, again, all according to reports, as the Rockets aren't getting into the specifics, but he left the arena per ESPN and the Athletics report in the middle of the game in which the Rockets went on to lose. They're 7th in a row, and they're playing right now in Philadelphia. It is the third quarter has just started, 76-71 Sixers. So we'll, of course, have those highlights for you coming up on Fox 26 News at 9. But here's what Coach Silas had to say before tonight's game to the media about suspending Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood for tonight.
Very different circumstances, and they're kind of being lumped together, which I understand because it's the same game. But as far as Kevin, he, you know, like I said, we had a spirited debate. He lost his temper at halftime to the point where I thought for what would be best for the team and the best for our culture as a group, and the just making sure that everybody is on the same page. I thought it would be best for him to be suspended for today's game. Christian, we had a disagreement as far as him going back into the game in the second half, and I decided it would be best for the team. And it's very much attached to accountability for everybody on our team. And my job is to hold people accountable to their actions and not overreact at all, but react appropriately. So that was the decision.
I like that phrasing, not overreact, but act appropriately. And as you heard Coach Silas say, it's a matter of accountability. And at the end of the day, this is still a job. And most of us don't have the luxury of being able to tell our boss or bosses, no, I'm not going to work. I refuse to do that. If anybody of us who didn't happen to be million-dollar athletes who are playing on national TV and have all the accolades and fame that comes with being a star in the professional ranks, you would face some kind of repercussions if you said, no, I'm not going to do what you're asking me. In the case of Christian Wood, I'm not going to do what I get paid to do, play basketball, or walk off in the middle of your shift, which is tantamount to what Kevin Porter Jr. is reported to have done, leaving in the middle of the game. So Coach Silas didn't get into the specifics of his conversations with Porter or with Wood about just who said what and how it went, but he did say that both players have accepted their suspensions, and he was asked how he feels about this as he's made his decision to suspend them for a game and how he thinks it'll affect the team moving forward.
I feel good. I mean, one thing about disputes, you always come out of it with a better understanding of each other. And with what happened, hopefully everybody grows from it, and maybe it doesn't happen immediately. Hopefully it does, but I know everybody in the locker room and those guys who are involved know where I stand, know what lines can be crossed and what lines can't, and we move on. But as far as what the future looks like, it's hard for me to say.
When asked about Kevin Porter Jr. specifically, who, remember, part of the reasons the Rockets were able to get him so cheap last year was because he had similar issues in Cleveland with dealing with emotional outbursts, dealing with his anger, and they had basically wiped their hands of him. And so that's why the Rockets were able to get him on the cheap, and he really blossomed once he got to Houston, and a lot of pressure was taken off him. That forget about being this hyped recruit like he was coming out of high school or when he was at Southern Cal, and people were saying, oh, that's going to be a one and done guy. He's going to go to the next level and be a star. All of that taken away once he got to Houston, and the Rockets said, take your time. They let him go to the G League to work some things out, to adapt to playing the point guard position. And he started to really take off, so much so, and I'm not talking about just taking off on the court, but even off the court, to the point that coming into this year, when the Rockets were having their preseason media gathering, Kevin Porter Jr. said, the Rockets organization saved my life, that I had so much going on mentally, psychologically, emotionally, so much off the court, away from just playing the game of basketball, that don't forget, this is just a 21-year-old kid, that as a 21-year-old, he had so much that he had to still learn and overcome, that he credited the Rockets with saving his life. And he believed that this was going to be a long-term marriage, he being a part of the Rockets. And thus far, up until now, whenever the Rockets talk about the rebuild, talk about looking towards the future, it's not just the 4 rookies who they took in the first round, highlighted by the second overall pick, Jalen Green, or Alperen Şengün, who the Rockets were able to trade back up, get in the middle of the first round, and who also looks like he can be a franchise cornerstone. Kevin Porter Jr. has so far, whenever you ask anybody in terms of the higher-ups with the Rockets, his name is brought up in tandem with all those young players, that this is going to be a building block towards whatever the future of the Rockets as a playoff contender looks like. And so, again, I mentioned KPJ, only 21 years old. Perhaps this is something that he's able to learn and grow from. And this isn't the first time in not just the NBA, but any type of team environment, professional, college, even down to the high school ranks, where emotions get hot, things get heated, somebody says or does something they shouldn't have, and this could be a learning situation for everyone. And that's something that Coach Silas was again asked about in his pregame meeting with the media up in Philadelphia this afternoon.
All part of it. He is, and he's emotional. He's a competitor. He's a good kid. He owns up to his mistakes when he makes them and tries not to make mistakes again. And that's pretty much all you can ask from a guy. So, yeah, we put a lot into him, and we knew that he had a past before he came here. But, we hold everybody accountable to what they do. And he crossed the line, and he'll be back. And we'll still love him. We'll still grow with him. And everything will be okay. So, we spent a lot of time. And for this to be blown out of proportion, it should not be. It should be a bump in the road, and we continue on, because if you really love somebody, you don't take one instance and say that's it, or make it to where it's more than it is. You love them, and then when stuff like this happens, you love them even more.
And so we will see just how this plays out after the 1-game suspension. And then the Rockets actually have a few days off after tonight. They don't play again, or at least they're not scheduled to play again until Friday night at Toyota Center. So we will see just what happens once the team returns to Houston, is able to get back to practicing, shoot-arounds. And again, the COVID situation just complicates all this as far as who's available, who can come into the arena, who cannot. So as of right now, no Christian Wood or Kevin Porter Jr. for the Rockets tonight. ESPN did report that both players traveled with the team to Philadelphia. They are just not playing in tonight's game, which, just to give you an update, they are midway through the third quarter in Philly, 84-75 76ers. Garrison Matthews, who just returned from the health and safety protocols for the Rockets, is the leading scorer for Houston with 22 points. That's on 6 of 8 shooting, including 4 of 6 from beyond the arc. Joel Embiid, who obviously is a superstar regardless of who he's going up against, but the Rockets completely devoid of bigs right now. He's already off to a monster night, 27 and 12 to go along with 6 assists. That's on 10 of 17 shooting. But the Rockets don't have Christian Wood, who's their starting center. Alperen Şengün is out for the foreseeable future after going down with injury over the weekend. And rookie Usman Yoruba, who you thought might get a chance to get some minutes with both Şengün and Wood out, he was placed in the NBA's health and safety protocols just before tonight's game. So not a lot of size when you are going up against arguably the best low post man in the NBA right now in Joel Embiid. So, of course, those highlights and team reaction coming up for you tonight on Fox 26 News at 9. We will also tonight check in with the new head coach of the LSU Tigers, Brian Kelly, in town as LSU is getting set to take on K-State tomorrow night at NRG Stadium. Obviously, Brian Kelly not acting as the head coach. That will officially, he's already taken on so many of the coaching duties, especially as it comes to recruiting and outreach and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of actual in-game coaching, he will not be the man on the sidelines tomorrow night for LSU, but he's obviously in town and will be at the game watching his new team. So we will hear from Coach Kelly tonight. We will also check in with the UH men's basketball team, who finally got back into action after almost a 2-week layoff, because remember, their conference opener against Cincinnati had to be postponed due to COVID and injuries decimating the UH roster, but they were able to play Sunday night on the road after a lengthy layoff, down to just 7 players who are available, and they were able to squeak past Temple. So we will hear from Coach Sampson and his Cougars tonight on Fox 26 News at 9. But before we sign off here on the Fox 26 Sports Stream, we do want to check in with the Texans, who were not able to push that win streak to 3 games. They hung around for most of the contest on the road in Santa Clara against the San Francisco 49ers yesterday, but ultimately just couldn't slow down so many of those big-name athletes that they have, specifically Deebo Samuel. I don't know whether to call him a big-name wideout or running back. That's why I'll just go with, we know that Deebo Samuel, especially if you play fantasy football, he's just like colleges, just label guy an athlete because he kind of plays all over. That's what Deebo Samuel does. Is Trey Lance getting the start, didn't light it up. Final numbers looked all right, but once you can get the ball to your playmakers, which is what the Niners are able to do, they were able to hand the Texans a loss. Here's what David Culley had to say this morning, though, as his team gets ready for their final game of the regular season. They will host the Tennessee Titans at noon on Sunday. Tennessee, if they win this game, which they're obviously heavily favored to do so, the Titans lock up the number 1 seed in the AFC, meaning they secure home field advantage throughout the playoffs and would nab a bye in the first round now that there are 7 teams who make the playoffs in each conference. So Coach Culley was asked what he's anticipating and what he would like to see from his team in their finale going up what is already a very talented team who the Texans did upset earlier this year in Nashville, but who's obviously coming in with a lot to play for.
Well, I want to see more consistency from us. We did not play very well, John, yesterday for 60 minutes in either phase. We didn't. We had our moments, but we didn't finish well at the end of the game, offensively, defensively, and special teams. We had things that we can't allow happen that will end up getting you in a situation that we're in yesterday and losing the ball game. But as far as them, I mean, it's the last game of the year for us. We want to go out with a win. Obviously, they're playing for home field advantage. I think regardless of that, doesn't really matter. We're going to play the game just like we would, whether they were playing for home field or not.
And what's interesting for the Texans, not just heading into this week, the final week of the season for them at least, but really the last few weeks is normally around this time, if your team is out of it, you're kind of looking towards the future, maybe getting some of the younger guys some more playing time. And we have seen that with the Texans, notably Davis Mills, who has looked good at times since taking over the reins again from Tyrod Taylor as the starting quarterback. But then you saw yesterday struggled against what we know is a veteran and talented 49ers defense. But what's interesting for the Texans is so many of the guys who you would say, all right, well, let's see what you got as you are building something towards next year, since you're looking beyond this season, since it's going to end on Sunday. So many of the guys who are going to be suiting up at NRG, that might be their final go round for the Texans. I was looking at the roster earlier this afternoon. There's 10 guys who have played more than 50% of the snaps for the Texans this year who are unrestricted free agents. And then when you get beyond just the guys who have already played more than half the snaps, there's still a lot of other recognizable names, big names, guys like Tyrod Taylor, tight end Jordan Akins, John Weeks, the longest tenured Texan. So many guys who will be free agents after the clock hits all zeros on Sunday. And that's when you really get to start to see Nick Caserio and this new regime that has been running things for the last year or so. How do they start to rebuild this franchise? Because it's almost a rebuild from the ground up. That we all know the Deshaun Watson situation is lingering there, and there's so many questions off the field about what is or is not going to happen with Deshaun Watson's legal cases and his legal situation. But the presumption is at some point the Texans will be able to trade him and get back multiple first and second round picks. And that, coupled with what is going to be a top 5 pick of your own, is how you start to rebuild this thing, because you're going to have a lot of empty roster spaces, but also a lot of cap room, because so many of these guys are unrestricted free agents. So the Texans unlikely to win their regular season finale. And I think especially with a Tennessee team that has everything to play for, it's going to be a very tall task for Davis Mills and company to possibly pull off the upset. But the real work for the Texans begins after this week in terms of how do you scout, how do you evaluate for the draft, for free agency. It looked last year like so much of the emphasis was bring in veterans on short-term, team-friendly deals and just try to trudge your way through an unknown situation at quarterback, and which has still not been resolved, obviously, and then trying to clear so many previous contracts off the books. And so that's why you knew with the Texans, it was going to be a lengthy rebuild. 2021 was not their year. It does not look like 2022 will be either, but we will at least see the final remnants of the present campaign come to a close Sunday at NRG. All right, that's going to do it for this latest installment of the Fox 26 Sports Stream. Again, we will have the latest on the Rockets, including the highlights from Philadelphia tonight. We'll hear from Brian Kelly. We will hear from Kelvin Sampson. As always, for all the up-to-the-minute updates and news on everything in the Houston sports scene, make sure you are following our sports director, Mark Berman. You can find him on Twitter at Mark Berman, Fox 26. For all of us here at Fox 26, I'm Sal Manine. We'll see you again next week.